The Gladiator tank acts as the main battle tank of the Primaris Space Marines, and it comes in 3 major variations. We are covering the second of 3 today, the Gladiator Reaper. The Gladiator Reaper is equipped with twin heavy onslaught Gatling cannons, Tempest bolters, and a thirst for killing infantry. Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and today we are covering the Gladiator Reaper, the anti-horde tank of the Primaris Marines. So, the Gladiator Reaper, like all of its brethren, comes in at 160 points for a standard tank profile, if not a little squishier than usual. Movement 10 inches is nice and fast, toughness 10 is fairly durable, but will quickly fall to any dedicated anti-tank, 3+ save is so-so, will love cover, and at 12 wounds is again very standard. Comparing this to other tanks, like say Leman Russ's, it's not super durable, however its damage output is quite exemplary. In terms of ranged weapons, you of course have the Tempest bolters, which are rapid fire 4, 24-inch range with 4 attacks that hit on 3s at strength 4, AP 1, and damage 1. Now this is a very, very solid profile for chewing through things like Imperial Guard, or say any other light infantry, Tau, Eldar. They will really hate to get hit by this, and when it's in rapid fire range, it truly is just a bullet hose, and that's just the start of it. It can of course take the twin heavy onslaught Gatling cannons, which are twin linked with devastating wounds, at 24-inch range with 12 attacks that hit on 3s at strength 6, AP 0, and damage 1. This is of course a really solid anti-light infantry profile. Again, things like guards will hate it, and given the high number of attacks and strength, even Space Marines aren't going to want to get hit by this. And there's many ways to give it extra AP, which will always be useful. And the devastating wounds actually does mean it can do a couple wounds to tanks and things like that, even though it won't be wounding them super efficiently in general. The heavy stubber, of course, can be mounted on the Pintle, which is 3 attacks that hit on 3s at 36-inch range, strength 4, AP 0, damage 1 with rapid fire 3. Again, very, very solid, and in general, is just more anti-infantry firepower. Then, of course, it can take an Icarus rocket pod, which is mounted on the back, if I'm not mistaken, with anti-fly 2+ that hits on 3s, D3 attacks at strength 8, AP 1, and damage 2 at 24-inch range. So all the weapons are rather close range, so this thing will want to be on the front lines. However, the Icarus rocket pod is of course extra useful against flying targets, which are of course always somewhat prevalent given the prevalence of things like jump packs, and of course is useful for just splatting Space Marines. In terms of melee weapons, it's awful. Close combat weapon, 3 attacks, hits on 4, strength 6, AP 0, damage 1. Don't charge this thing, though it is quite good at shooting out its way out of combat, as none of its weapons are blast or anything. Then it of course has Deadly Demise D3, and Rotating Death is its ability, which gives its Gatling cannon Sustained Hits 2. This is super powerful. Sustained Hits 2 is extremely strong, especially with Twin Linked. This means each 6 you get counts for 3 hits, and will honestly mean that most of the time, if you are able to do this, you should just be rerolling everything that isn't a 6, because every 6 is so much more valuable than any other dice. This is, of course, only viable if you're fighting something where you can Oath of Moment their infantry, but that's, of course, this thing's best application. Though, I would say that the Gladiator Reaper, despite being the polar opposite of the Lancer, shares a lot of similarities. Where the Lancer annihilates vehicles, this thing annihilates infantry. Of course, against heavily armored troops it may struggle a little bit, but the devastating wounds does help with that. And as I mentioned, rerolling for 6s, very useful, and for 5s if you're an Iron Lance if you use a stratagem. And of course, it loves Gladius for the extra speed and AP on command. Giving all of its weapons an extra AP makes this thing really efficient against all kinds of infantry. This thing, of course, is unlike a lot of other tanks where it wants to be up close. All of its guns are close range, and it wants to be firing them at full effect. In close range, rapid fire range specifically, this thing will really tear through infantry at a horrifying rate. And while it may seem slightly pointless to bring this to a game against something like Knights, or say in a tournament where you're into a locked list build, I'd say the Lancer still has use against armies like that, because they often bring things like Inquisitorial Henchmen, which this thing will eat for breakfast. And, of course, its devastating wounds does mean it still can chip the last couple wounds off of a tank if the need truly arises, though it won't be super efficient at that. In general, this is a very solid tank, not as strong as the Lancer just because, well, the Lancer is just an annihilation beam, but I think the Reaper does have its place, and the two complement each other quite well. A Lancer, of course, can deal with the heavy targets, and this can keep the enemies off of the Lancer. They complement each other well, and you'll definitely want to bring some auxiliary shooting units alongside this one to complement the fact that this is really good against infantry. You'll also want some heavy firepower. However, for the price, it's not super tough, which is a problem. However, I think its damage output is solid enough for it to be worth consideration if there's a lot of infantry in the meta, or if you're struggling to deal with it. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling, hope you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time! The Predator Annihilator is the anti-tank variant of the Predator tanks. of course mainly known for their long use by the Space Marines, as well as some other forces of the Imperium. They have seen service since the Horus Heresy. Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and today we're covering the Predator Annihilator, the anti-tank weapon of the old Space Marines, if you will. The Predator Annihilator is of course a light tank coming in at 130 points, the same as its Destructor cousin. It moves 10 inches, its toughness 10, 3+ save, 11 wounds, 6+ leadership, and OC3. Fairly standard for the cost, but not necessarily a bad thing, as it is still very resilient to all but the heaviest of anti-tank weapons, though things like buffed autocannons could really give it some trouble, and las cannons of course will blow holes in it very efficiently. On the pintle, you can of course have a combi bolter or combi weapon. The combi bolter, rapid fire 2, 24-inch range, 2 attacks, a hit on 3, strength 4, AP 0, damage 1. Said it one time, and I'll say it a million times. It's good at light anti-infantry, and not much more. The combi weapon, rapid fire 1, devastating wounds, anti-infantry 4+, 24-inch range, 1 attack, hits on 4, strength 4, AP 0, and damage 1. Much worse than the combi bolter. Leave this one at home. You can of course mount a Hunter Killer on it, which is 1 shot at 48-inch range, 1 attack that hits on 2, strength 14, AP 3, and damage d6. A nice little anti-tank one-shot weapon. However, if you ask any player, they will say it always misses because it feels like it always does. Then it of course has the Predator Las Cannon, which is twin-linked at 48-inch range, 1 attack that hits on 3s at strength 14, AP 3, and damage d6+1. This is at least very efficient at wounding vehicles, though with only 1 attack it is quite prone to missing, unless you are buffing it or aim it at the Oath of Moment target. Then on the sponsons, you can take either a Heavy Bolter or a Las Cannon. The Heavy Bolter has sustained hits 1, 3 attacks that hit on 3s, 36-inch range, strength 5, AP 1, and damage 2, and the Las Cannons are 1 attack that hit on 3s, 48-inch range, strength 12, AP 3, and damage d6+1. Of course, the Las Cannons are the better option here. As much as I like the Heavy Bolters, they just don't really compare to the Las Cannons, and also the Las Cannons interact with the special rule. In terms of melee weapons, fairly standard tank thing, 6 attacks, hits on 4, strength 6, AP 0, damage 1. Things don't want to be in melee, obviously, though it might squash a guardsman or two if the need arises. It has Deadly Demise D3, which is of course not too insane, but of course could do some damage to your lines. So make sure you're wary of that. When it's getting on low health, it might be time to move it out of position, as is to not shower your army with mortal wounds on an unlucky roll. Then of course the Annihilator's ability is Annihilator, which lets you reroll a damage roll of 1 when targeting monsters or vehicles. Now this is of course where it's the most important, though this isn't as impactful as it may seem, as not only do you have to roll a 1 for it to do anything, you are also only not gaining that much damage. I believe the math's out, you're only actually getting a half a wound more on average in terms of damage. Not bad, will save a command point from time to time, but overall is not quite as impactful as the Destructor special rule. And speaking of the Destructor, which I will keep comparing it to, the Annihilator unfortunately lacks the main draw of that tank, which is, of course, its general purpose nature and its suite of various weapons. This, of course, means mainly the autocannon and then the sponson las cannons, which gives it a general purpose role, where the Annihilator is a specialist tank. And in terms of being a specialist tank, it doesn't compete very well with the Gladiator Lancer, mainly. And in its own price bracket, I'd say the Ballistus is much better, mainly just because its las cannon has more shots, as well as a slightly better special rule. Of course, though, I don't think it's outrageously awful. I don't think it's as bad as Reavers. However, if you do want to bring a Predator tank, I would recommend just running it as a Destructor, mainly because the Destructor will usually do more damage to tanks. And I already mentioned this earlier, but its special rule, while handy for saving a command point here and there, is unfortunately nothing special, and won't actually average you that much more damage than if you just kind of stayed with the 1. You only on average get about 1 more pip of damage. I think a main buff for this thing would be to drop it by 10 to 15 points, and also to give its main las cannon 2 shots to make it less swingy, which things like the Repulsor and the Lancer don't deal with, as they natively get 2 shots, which is a big deal for these big anti-tank weapons. And of course, those tanks have much better damage results if they do punch through. Unfortunately, out of the Predator tanks, this one just lags far behind the Destructor, and isn't really worth bringing. However, I do hope it gets buffs, and I think that it very well could. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling. Hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. The Gladiator tanks make up the main battle tanks of the Primaris Marines. They come in 3 major variations. We've already covered the Lancer and the Reaper, and now we're covering the close-ranged monster hunter of the Gladiator Valiant. meant to act as a close-range fire base for Space Marines to deal with hard targets. Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and today we are covering the Gladiator Valiant. The Gladiator Valiant is, of course, by its lore, quite close range, and it comes in at, of course, 160 points, the same as all the other Gladiators. It has the same stat line, which is 10 inches of movement, so decently fast. Toughness 10, a 3+ save, 12 wounds, leadership 6+, and OC 3. The toughness 10 is fine enough, though will crumple to things like a dedicated anti-tank, though is quite resilient to small arms. The 3+ save really appreciates cover, and of course does not want to get hit by things like Melta. And speaking of ranged weapons, this thing comes with 2 side-mounted multi-Meltas, which have Melta 2, 18-inch range, 2 attacks, ballistic skill 3+, strength 9, AP 4, and damage d6. This is probably the best weapon on the tank, and it really does need to get close to use them. Then on the turret, we of course have the Twin Last Talon, which is twin, 36-inch range, 2 attacks that hit on 3s, strength 10, AP 3, and damage d6 plus 1. This is mainly let down by its low strength, as comparing it to the Lancer, it's not even fair. And this thing has a much shorter range than the Lancer, as well as in general much lower damage, which is quite unfortunate as I quite like the look of the weapon. Then on the pinto, like the other Gladiators, you can mount the Heavy Stubber, which is rapid fire 3, 36-inch range, 3 attacks, hit on 3s at strength 4, AP 0, and damage 1. Then of course you can also mount a Icarus Rocket Pod, which is anti-fly, 2+, D3 attacks, hit on 3s, 24-inch range, strength 8, AP 1, and damage 2. So this thing really does need to get close to use most of its weapons. The multi-Meltas are essential for this thing to even scratch the damage that the Lancer's doing, and even then it is still quite difficult as you need to get within 9-inch range, and even then you will still be struggling to match the Lancer. Close combat is completely forgettable. 3 attacks, 6, AP 0, damage 1, don't charge this thing. In terms of abilities, Deadly Demise D3 is fairly standard for a tank of this size, and can have some impact if this thing dies in the heart of the enemy army. That could of course allow to crack some harder targets. Then its ability is add 1 to hit rolls when targeting the nearest monster or vehicle. This is not great, in my opinion, for a myriad reason. First of all, it's already hitting on 3, so hitting on 2s, while certainly a buff, is not huge, and Space Marines will often be shooting at what they need to most with the Oath of Moment mechanic. This also only applies to the closest thing, so if you don't really have any monsters or vehicles that are terribly close, that are worth shooting at, this is effectively a pointless rule. As well as the fact that this thing doesn't really need help hitting, it needs help wounding, as all of its weapons are strength 10 and below, which makes it quite vulnerable to things like toughness. Even 11 on something like a Lehman Rust, this thing will not be doing very well against it. I think this rule is overall by far the worst out of the 3 Gladiators, and really hurts the Valiant a lot when it really could have become something special with an interesting special rule. And beyond that, there really isn't that much to say about the Valiant. It's really by far the worst of the Gladiator tanks. Its weapons are all medium strength, sort of medium-high, I'd say, and are really only good against toughness armies that are quite low. Things like Sisters, whose highest toughness, I believe, is 10, which this thing will, of course, be effective against all targets, but that doesn't really mean much when so is the Lancer. This thing does pair quite well with the Thunderstrike. If this thing gets within Melta range and you mark a vehicle or monster with +1 to wound, it will do a lot of damage, but for that same price you could buy 2 Gladiator Lancers that would be doing a very similar amount of damage every turn with no external buffs. In general, this thing also falls behind the Reaper in the fact that it's super close range but doesn't have the weapons to keep infantry off of it. The Reaper doesn't mind being up close because it can chew through entire squads of infantry in 1 round of shooting. This thing will not be doing that. And it needs to get super close to the enemy for its Meltas to be in range for it to do any reasonable amount of damage. Overall, the Valiant is a rather sad adage to the Gladiator lineup. If you have one, I would just run it as a Valiant and not waste your time running this god-awful tank. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. The Predator chassis tanks are some of the most venerable and long-serving tanks in the Imperium, and especially the Space Marines. Of course, the Destructor is equipped with an autocannon mainly used for general-purpose anti-infantry and anti-light vehicle firepower. Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and we are covering the Predator's Destructor, late at night. Anyways, so the Predator Destructor is of course a rather classic kit, and it's in lore has been in service since the Horus Heresy, though this is a much more updated model that we see in the current setting of 40k. The Predator Destructor comes in at 130 points. It has a fairly standard light tank profile, movement 10 inches, so it's rather zippy, toughness 10, a 3+ save, 11 wounds, leadership 6+, and OC 3. This is fairly standard, but that's not necessarily a bad thing when it comes to this. As for 130 points, it is relatively tough, and it's fast. Then, of course, as with any Space Marine thing, it comes with a whole suite of weapons. A combi bolter or combi weapon can be mounted on the pintle. The combi bolter is rapid fire 2, 24 inches, 2 attacks, hit on 3, strength 4, AP 0, and damage 1. A fairly simple but solid enough anti-light infantry spray. The combi weapon is rapid fire 1, devastating wounds and anti-infantry 4+, 24 inch range, 1 attack that's on 4s, at AP 0, strength 4, and damage 1. Very weak, not worth bringing over the combi bolter. Then, of course, you can staple on a Hunter Killer, which is a one-shot missile that has 48-inch range, 1 attack that hits on 2s at strength 14, AP 3, and damage D6. A very nice anti-infantry tank, or anti-tank round that will almost certainly always miss because, of course, it does. The Predator Autocannon is rapid fire 2, with 4 attacks that hit on 3s at 48-inch range, strength 9, AP 1, and damage 3. Very solid for shooting at light vehicles as well as most kinds of infantry. The Heavy Bolter is sustained hits 1, 3 attacks, hit on 3s, 36-inch range at strength 5, AP 1, and damage 2. And then the last cannon is 1 attack that hits on 3s at 48-inch range, strength 12, AP 3, and damage D6+1. Those two are, of course, the sponsored mounted weapons. And while the Heavy Bolter may play slightly nicer with its special rule, I would always take the last cannons just to round the tank out better. Then, in terms of melee weapons, it's a very weak armored hull, 6 attacks that hit on 4s at strength 6, AP 0, and damage 1. Then, in terms of abilities, in terms of core, it has Deadly Demise D3, which is fairly standard for a vehicle of its size, but of course that is something to be wary of if you have anything fragile nearby. Then its special rule is the Destructor. Each time this model makes a ranged attack against infantry, add 1 AP. Now this is of course very solid, though it is of course slanted more towards hunting infantry of course, but that's not a bad thing as the Destructor autocannon really needs extra AP to deal with the tougher kinds of infantry. And the last cannons even appreciate it when shooting at things that may not, or may rely on a, say, invulnerable save or in cover. Anyways, from here we're actually going to cover the best use of this tank, and it's fairly standard, as it is a very simple unit from a sort of time long since past in 40k's history. The Predator Destructor is a bare-bones tank, if ever there was one, is a way to put it. It has its main turret weapon, then of course it has the 2 sponsons, and a pintle-mounted weapon with a Hunter Killer. This is of course a sign of its time, as it's not quite as weapons-focused as things that came a little after it, things like the Lehman Russ, the Bane Blade, or of course the Rogel Thorn, the Sisters variant, or the, of course, modern Primaris tanks. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. This thing is one of the cheapest tanks in the game that is not, papier-mâché, and it still packs a very solid punch. Its autocannon is great against all kinds of infantry, and the last cannons are, of course, always solid against tanks. Even the Hunter Killer adds to that, even though most players have such bad luck with them even hitting. Overall, it's a very well-rounded tank. Its main weapon, of course, really appreciates its special rule, and it does really do a lot of damage, especially in rapid-fire range against things like Space Marines and even Terminators. The last cannons, of course, help it deal with things above toughness 9, as well as also pitching in against, again, things like Terminators, where the autocannon might not be able to finish the job fully. The last cannons can seriously put in a lot of work there. I'd say that in its price bracket, it's by far the most flexible tank. Out of all of these sort of mid-weight tanks. Of course, the Gladiators all have arguably more firepower, but they all come at a higher price tag and are all more specialized into their, of course, specific niches. Where the Destructor, of course, has its las cannons and its autocannon. It can have its cake and eat its too. In general, I'd say that the Predator is a very simple tank, but a very efficient one. If you just need firepower, you're not going to find a better package anywhere else. It's an old tank, it's a venerable tank, it's a well-loved tank, it's a classic tank. It's a tank that gets the job done with none of the frills, and for a pretty efficient price. However, it's not perfect. Of course, things like las cannons will still give it a very bad day, but still, for its price, it can't have absolutely everything, and being weak to some of the best weapons in the game, I think is a totally fair trade-off. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. The Gladiator tanks represent the main battle tank used by the Primaris Space Marines. They are a more modern invention of the 41st millennium, and come with three major variations, and of course today we are covering the Gladiator Lancer, which has no artwork of it, so excuse just the model backgrounds for this video. And hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and welcome to another video. Today we're of course covering the Gladiator Lancer, the tank hunter of the Primaris lineup of tanks. So the Gladiator Lancer comes in at 160 points, and for that you get a slightly fragile tank profile. At movement 10 inches, it is at least quite fast. With only toughness 10, though, it isn't that much tougher than a Predator, and this extends further to the 3+ save and 12 wounds. It really is quite a fragile tank, all things considered. While it won't crumple to things like bolters, it will crumple quite quickly to things like dedicated anti-tank, and especially strength 10 weapons. In terms of weapons, it of course has two storm bolters that can be shot for frag storms. The storm bolters come in at rapid fire 2, 24-inch range, 2 attacks that hit on 3s at strength 4, AP 0, and damage 1. Fairly standard, we see this on most Space Marine tanks. It's a nice little burst of anti-infantry fire, but not much more than that. If you prefer the closer range but higher shots of the frag storm, I totally get that. The frag storm comes in with blast, 18-inch range, d6 attacks, hit on 3s at strength 4, AP 0, and damage 1. There is something to be said that the Fragstorm grenade launcher works better as a panic weapon, as if enemies are getting that close, this thing could be in serious danger of getting charged. Then, of course, the main event is the Lancer Laser Destroyer. This thing has heavy, so it does like to stand still if it has the opportunity. 72-inch range, 2 attacks that hit on 3s at strength 14, AP 4, and damage d6 plus 3. Now, all but the toughest of vehicles will get smoked by this thing quite efficiently. High damage numbers and high strength means that they can't rely on toughness, and of course AP4 is only really going to bounce off of invulnerable saves, or extremely high save combos. This thing is of course very, very solid. Then on top at the pintle you can mount a heavy stubber, rapid fire 3, 36-inch range, 3 attacks, hits on 3, strength 4, AP 0, damage 1. Not much to write home about, but it is useful in case there's any hordes that start getting really close to this thing. Of course, it also has an Icarus rocket pod, which is anti-fly 2+, D3 attacks that hit on 3s at 24-inch range, strength 8, AP 1, and damage 2. Good for splatting a Space Marine or two, as well as also just helping against keeping infantry away from this thing, which it really doesn't want to be dealing with. Then, in terms of ability, it of course has Deadly Demise D3, befitting of a medium-sized tank, and then Aquilon Optics is its main ability, which each time this model is selected to shoot can reroll 1 hit roll, wound roll, and damage roll. This is of course super useful and will usually mean you're converting all of your attacks to saves. And of course, if you already did that, it gives you a very solid chance of doing a much larger amount of damage. This is a super powerful ability, though it does have some slight overlap with Oath of Moment. I don't think that's the end of the world, just given the fact that it also affects wounds and damage rolls. It's overall one of the best abilities in the game, and it pairs perfectly with the Lancer Laser Destroyer. Of course. Now, in terms of best use, the Lancer is a tank with a reputation of being a tank destroyer. Its weapon is super effective against anything, and anyone who knows what it does will always target it first. So it is important to give it an ample screen of other Space Marines, as well as trying to keep it in cover to try and make the most of its rather mediocre defensive profile. For the massive 23% increase in points, this thing isn't that much tougher than a Predator, and in general will need some sort of things to keep it safe, as it also doesn't want to be wasting its time shooting at hordes if they get into melee with it. In terms of buffs, like most Space Marine things, it fits right in at home in the Gladius Task Force, mainly for the increased speed, though of course cranking out an extra AP on its auxiliary weapons is also useful, and also the extra AP on its Laser Destroyer will bring it to AP 5, which means without an invulnerable save you can't save against this thing. In terms of other detachments, of course Iron Storm is a rather horrific prospect. You could give this thing a 5+ sustained hits, which on the re-rolling main cannon, you really need to fear getting an extra save through, which could spell death for not only medium tanks, but also heavy tanks. Of course, this thing is rather foolproof to use. You'll just want to put it in a place where it's not going to get charged by chaff, and then keep plinking away at vehicles. As I mentioned, its cannon is effective against not only heavy tanks, but things like knights. Even things like the big knights, Castellans or Knight Tyrants, depending on your persuasion. And things lighter than them, like, say, War Dogs, will get absolutely ripped apart by that Laser Destroyer. This is a great vehicle, and a good addition to any army. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.